Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we're going to be looking at the Strider, which is not a super common unit in this neck of the woods. Those are basically the 5 Striders that we have access to here in the Oregon Federate Trade Alliance. And honestly, they've been painted different ways here because, well, they would have all been painted the same way if not for anything else. I mean, it's not like I get a lot of people from the Fed Sons bringing them over here to get fixed or to Torian Concordat. They are decently common in the Fed Sons from what I heard, but it's not something that they have huge amounts of. It's really a thing that the Free Worlds League has been using a decent amount, and the Cicada has been using as well, but it's not super popular there either. It's just one of those older Omni-Mechs, and it's a pretty decent one, if you ask me here, compared to some of the others that were built around the same era. So let's get into it. The Strider is an early Inner Sphere Omni-Mech, and we can tell that they had some limitations with the technology, and Luthien Armor Works really had some problems with sourcing some of the parts. While it is advanced in many ways, it basically copies technologies from a foreign invader that they weren't too keen to share, and there was a whole lot of quirks and a whole lot of problems going around the Draconis Combine at the time, especially in providing some of the more advanced pieces of gear that would be used on various mechs. It's not to say that it's not a revolutionary thing. At the time, it was really the peak of Inner Sphere Omni-Mech technology. But as an example, you'll never see a Strider with full arm actuators, even though, well, technically it would be possible. The particular pod set for that just never has been made, and you'd have to make it yourself if you wanted to use it, as an example. The Strider also has some odd quirks here and there, but it is still a very good little machine. The Strider took inspiration from the Cicada, which was a quite odd machine at the time, and it had very limited penetration because, well, nobody had been building it for a long time, and it wasn't that common to begin with. The Cicada had been around, but you have to say here that it had suffered massive amounts of attrition as a scout that had barely enough armor to hold it together. And, well, a decent amount of weapons for a scout, but you could probably load the same thing on a mech half its size for a third of the price. The DCMS and Luthien Armor Works wanted a medium scout mech with decent combat capability and armor to enhance their light formations. So working on an Omni-Mech that would be able to do that was a pretty good idea at the time. The end result, the Strider, was slower than the original Cicada, but it had almost double the armor and a much larger load capacity compared to the Cicada. The fact that it didn't have to have a specific weapon loadout at any time and you could just swap it around was also a pretty nice thing. Scout pilots, being silly, they didn't quite like it because they always think that speed is life, but I have to say that it's a quite silly motto to live by because, well, most of them die by it as well. A combination of speed and armor is generally what's going to keep you alive. Just having speed just means that the one lucky shot will take you out, and just having armor means that you won't be able to do that scout job and come back. So, you know, there you really need the balance for a good scout. So you had the ability to choose what you wanted the Strider to have as far as weapons and equipment, and it didn't have any hard-mounted equipment compared to a lot of early spheroid Omni-Mechs, especially things like the Owen, as an example, who has a massive electronic suite and is meant to be kind of a scout. The Strider just doesn't have that and could be configured just about any way you wanted, which made it quite good for a number of ways. The Strider did not attract customers in drove, however, compared to most of the early Omni-Mechs. The DCMS was happy with it, and they ordered quite a few of them, and commands received entire lances of them, and they had more available when needed. There was a good number of them that were also sold to the Federated Commonwealth, but not as many as one would think. A lot of them were also used during Operation Bulldog, Operation Serpent, so they were lost during those missions. The only licensor for the design was Iron Battletech Unlimited, who built them off their Shiro 3 plants, which is currently under the control of the Duchy of Andurian. They still build them, and they build them in a decent amount. And it means that Andurian has quite a few of them, and the Free Worlds League, well, the reborn Free Worlds League at large, also has a decent number. At 40 tons, the Strider does match the Cicada in weight, at least, but it doesn't match it in speed, going up to 97 kilometers per hour using a GM240. It's not an XL engine, which is pretty darn nice at this particular era, but the engine is only equipped with single heat sinks, and replacing them with doubles would actually, well, not quite work since it's an Omni-Mech, so it's a bit of an issue with that particular machine. The GM240 is not a super rare engine. That's a big plus there, and it's not that expensive either compared to, let's say, one of the 320 XL or something along those lines that you would need in a Cicada of the era. So there are some advantages there. The body is made of endo steel, which saves you about 2 tons compared to a standard chassis, and it's protected by 7.5 tons of standard plates, which is quite good for a mech in this weight class. It's not the maximum you could expect on a Scout or anything like that, but it's more than enough for a mech like this. You've got cases that are built in the side torso, increasing survivability significantly, but it does cut into your weight class. Most people say that it's not hard-mounted equipment. It is hard-mounted because in modern Omni-Mechs you can remove and put in the cases. It's still not bad there, and it leaves you with 12 tons of equipment and weapons, which is quite decent on a 40-ton mech with that level of survivability. The primary configuration of the Strider is your Scout Commander, which is capable of defending itself, which is quite nice in this day and age. To perform these scout duties fairly well here, you have the ubiquitous Beagle Active Probe, which is tied into the sensor system. It'll allow you to find various units that are hidden. It'll allow you to just go deep into a building in order to find if there's anything fancy in there. It's perfectly reasonable as far as a piece of equipment goes. Your primary means of defense will be a pair of 6-tube of Artemis-guided SRMs in the arms, fed by 2 tons of reload. That'll give you a very nice amount of punch, and you're fast enough to bring them to bear, well, generally. To round things up, you've got a small laser in the nose if you run out of ammunition, or if you just need to poke something at very close range. It's not fantastic, but you're not going to overeat either, thanks to, well, your standard heat sinks on there. Alpha configuration is something quite special, but you will see a lot of Strider pilots actually don't like being put in that particular unit for some specific reason. Your main weapon is still a small laser that is mounted under the cockpit, and that's about it. For electronics, however, you've got quite a few different things here. It starts with the Beagle Active Probe for your detection and a C3 Slave unit to share telemetry with other mechs in your unit. You then add a tag to spot for artillery and semi-guided missile, making this popular amongst the good people of the Free Worlds League. Finally, you have a pair of NARC missile beacon launcher in order to tag units with the NARC, so anybody else with missiles that are compatible with the system will be able to shoot at higher accuracy. This is basically an electronic warfare machine. It doesn't have really any massive offensive capabilities. It's not quite as mobile as it might want here. You might have wanted to put some jump jets on there instead of a pair of NARC beacons, but you know, it works for what it's meant to do. It's just that some pilots like to be able to destroy the targets that they have in front of them and not just mark them for death. Bravo configuration, on the other hand, takes advantage of Alpha configuration and shows you that you can do just about whatever you want with Omni-Mechs. The Strider is not stuck in the dedicated Scout category, and now it mounts a pair of 10 Rakavel RMs in order to provide artillery support, well, long-range missile support, to other units. It's great for fire support, deploying mines, smokes, just being a general nuisance, and if, like I said, you have someone with the Alpha configuration putting narcs on people, well, it's going to be even more efficient. Charlie configuration is a mix of a few things, but it really ends up being a medium-range striker rather than a close-range unit or a scout. The main weapon is arguably the center torso-mounted large laser, which gives you very good direct fire potential, almost as good as a Clan ER medium laser, which is much lighter and generates less heat. Never mind that, it is a good weapon on a inner sphere mech at least. The arms mount boxes of 5 racks of LRMs with 2 tons of reload in the torso, giving you some flexibility. You can mount some of those mine-laying rounds, or my favorite, the smoke rounds in there, to give you just that flexibility and that ability to fight fairly well. To round things out, you also have a C3 slave unit, which is quite beneficial on a mech that is going to stay at medium range from the enemy targets. So if you have another guy with a C3 that is closer, well, it's going to be able to take advantage of that. Delta configuration goes back to being a scout unit with some of the advanced electronic and close-range weapons. You start with a C3 slave unit, which is combined with a Beagle active probe to give you decent detection and telemetry, while you also have a tag to point at people and laugh as arrow 4s land on them. Each arm packs a set of 2 tubes of Streak SRM and a medium laser, giving you significant short-range damage for a Strider at least. The cockpit sits on top of a small laser, so you've got, well, decent amounts of guns on there as well. It's basically a big Locust with more electronics and a little bit slower. It does what it's meant to do, and it's going to do it fairly well with a decent amount of armor. Echo configuration is a straight upgrades in terms of firepower from your original primary configuration, taking advantage of the new technologies that were available now in 3058. Scouting capabilities are sacrificed. You remove the Beagle active probe on there, but the SRM launchers are now guided by Streak technology instead of Artemis 4, meaning that your missiles are guaranteed a hit if they manage to lock on. The small laser is also replaced with a medium laser to give you a little bit more bite. It's rather functional. I think it's a decent upgrade here, especially if you don't need that scouting ability here, which is something that ends up happening more often than you would think. Romeo configuration was used by the 2nd Star League during the destruction of Clan Smoke Jaguars, basically because they were running out of the regular parts that they had. So they had to start using clan-graded equipment that they were salvaging and grabbing off the Smoke Jaguars, and honestly, this makes this particular design work very well. The main weapons are a pair of a Streak 6 tube of SRM, which gives you extra range thanks to the clan technology there. And to back this up, you get a pair of medium pulse laser, which gives you fantastic accuracy and damage potential. Would you be able to reproduce that with the inner sphere technology? Not quite. The problem is really the difference in weight for all that equipment. You could probably mount a pair of regular 6 tube of SRM where you would lose some of the range, and maybe medium X-pulse lasers to back it up to give you something decent. Foxtrot configuration was nicknamed the Grand Jenner by various pilots, or more likely by Luthien Armor Works' overactive marketing department. The big difference compared to most normal Strider is that this one does mount a full set of jump jets, giving you the jump range of 180 meters, which is quite significant. Each arm mounts a single medium laser, giving you a decent short-range punch. The main weapon, however, is a set of Streak 4 tubes of SRM in each shoulder. You have a little bit of a different type of firepower, let's say, compared to a Jenner, but it works fairly well in my opinion. Golf configuration came out during the Jihad, where the production of the design was slowed down to a crawl, as only Irian was building them after Law had a little bit of a nuclear accident that was partially self-inflicted. This one protects itself at closer range using a pair of VR small laser, which is actually quite decent. It gives you at least decent enough range compared to regular small laser for not that big of an increase in each generation. The main weapon, however, is a pair of 7 rack or tubes of medium-T missile launchers with a ton of SRM or LRM at your choice, or just about any specialty ammo that you want. At 7 tubes, well, it is going to be very deadly as used with SRMs, and for LRMs, well, it'll give you some utility. This is a quite decent mid-range unit, in my opinion. Around the same time, there was an experimental kit that came out of the Lyran Alliance, and I have to say that this one really stayed an experimental kit because, well, the equipment on it is just a little bit odd. The whole design is really built around a bombast laser, which is an odd large laser derivative which can be charged up and fired at different power levels. It's not very good. I prefer capacitor-powered PPCs, and it's easier to maintain in the long run. To support this, though, the X-ray configuration also has a pair of a 3 tubes rack of MML with a ton of reloads as well for each DSRM and LRMs. I mean, replace the bombast laser with something more sensible, and it'll probably work better. Another big problem on there is that the bombast laser generates a huge amount of heat on a mech that has single heat sinks, so you can tell why this is basically a thing that is staying experimental. A Republican-era design, the Hotel configuration doesn't pack heavy lasers, surprisingly, but it still is equipped with clan-graded weapons because they had access to them. This is basically a Bravo configuration that has been reconfigured with clan gear, basically mounting a pair of 10 rack of streak-guided LRMs that they were borrowed from our friends in Clan Shade Falcons or whoever was working with the Republic of the Sphere at the time. This is pretty darn nice here because you don't have any minimum range on there, so you can use them as brawling weapons if required to, and since you only fire when you got a perfect target lock, well, all the missiles are going to hit and you're not going to be wasting ammunition. On my end, though, I probably would have preferred a set of clan-graded 20 rack of LRMs instead for more maximum damage but more variance, or if you wanted a little bit less variance in your damage, you could go with clan 15s. With Artemis guidance and maybe an extra ton of reload. There's a little bit of things that you could do here, maybe even Artemis 5 guidance on those Clan 15s. Really, you have to look at what's available, and it would have been a nice fire support medium. My configuration is another super specialized design, and another one which is not really well armed. Well, not armed at all, actually. What you get is a pair of C3 boosted master, which will allow you to command a full company of C3 mechs through the thick and the mud, and, well, anything that is not called an Angel ECM. Angels ECM are about the only thing that can block a C3 boosted master and C3 boosted slaves. But those are heavier than the regular C3s, so to do the math here, it is up to you. I have seen, however, a number of those, probably dating from even before the regular mic was introduced, with a pair of regular C3s, along with a pair of medium lasers for defense, which is quite decent here, and actually would be a good command unit for mechs during the early stages of Operation Bulldog and Operation Serpent. The Duchy of Endurian is always looking for new equipment to guarantee their independence nowadays, and they've commissioned a refurbished Strider from Irian since they own their factory. The big change here is actually importing a Technicron Endosteel chassis, which is made of the good clan-graded Endosteel, and probably refitting their own Endosteel mills to be able to build it in the future. The other big change is the use of double heat sinks on the base model rather than a single heat sinks, as there's one that's going to be outside of the engine. It does take a little bit more room there, but you save room with the better Endosteel chassis, so it does help. The case system is also now optional on it. You can add it back in or remove it as is needed nowadays. And case 2s being more popular, you'll probably see a few configuration using those case 2s instead. It's not a huge change. It does improve its ability to fight in general with the double heat sinks. The Endosteel saving you some space here also allows you to move things around for various configurations. I'm not sure if they're going to change the name of it or they're just going to keep calling it the Strider with a different production code. We will see what the Endurians really do. I think one of the problem with the Strider is that it's not the best Innersphere Omnimech out there or the most popular one, because it's really in a category where it can't shine all that well. There are plenty of scouts out there's plenty of quick strikers and medium strikers, so it really falls into that particular group, and while it can do both fairly easily, you've got standard mechs that can do either that are going to be cheaper anyways. The fact that you can turn it into one or the other, or even make it a frontline commander with those twin C3 units, does make it a good thing for frontline commanders and for mercenary commanders as well. If you're able to get them, they are quite worth it for a mercenary unit because you will be able to reconfigure them on the go, but attrition rate on Striders is rather high because, well, it ends in a particular position where the attrition is high. They're not the hardest thing to repair or rebuild. All you really need is Endosteel, and you should be able to get one in most big trade hubs over the Inner Sphere as they've been in production for long enough. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.